Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this panel, Lost in a Side Quest, Gaming with ADHD. Games are meant to be played by everyone, and that includes those with ADHD. If you're unfamiliar, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Typically, it impacts like attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. But it's a spectrum where experiences and strategies will vary from person to person. And today, the four of us have come together to share our experiences and explore what ADHD means in the context of games. I'm honored to be joined by this incredible panel of experts and advocates who have ADHD. Each of us brings a unique intersectional perspective and experience that will help unpack this critical topic. We hope that you leave today with insights, examples, and actionable ideas for making games with ADHD in mind. Now, before diving into the questions, which we have quite a few, and we're all very, very eager and excited to share today, I do want to give folks a chance to introduce themselves first. So I'll go first. I'm Morgan Baker. My pronouns are she, they. I am an accessibility development director for electronic arts. My description is I am a white woman with very long brown hair, large round glasses, and I'm wearing a black sweater today. For myself, I have combined type ADHD, so I experience like inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity to a great degree. And I also too actually am deaf as well with other disabilities, so we can talk about that during the intersectional portion. But I've been managing ADHD since, well, I was born, but I was diagnosed when I was 14, so it's been a hot while, but I've had lots of time to develop coping strategies and stuff like that. Now, enough about me. I'm going to pass this over to others for their introductions, a little bit about themselves, and their descriptions. So I'm going to pass this over to Thor.
Hello there. Thank you so much for having me as a part of the panel. And hi there. My name is Thor. I am an accessibility advocate with ADHD. I have short, curly, dark brown hair and a mixed skin tone. I also have a beard and mustache on my face. And I'm wearing a purple shirt or a purple button up shirt with a black shirt underneath of it. I am currently looking into an autism diagnosis as well, but I've been dealing with my ADHD since I was diagnosed at the age of 4. So I have been managing it my entire life, and more recently have gotten more under the nail, so to speak, of what ADHD really is and how it affects people in their daily lives. Thanks to the streaming community and more having deeper conversations about the topic itself.
Perfect. Thanks, Thor. And I'm going to pass this over to Sabina now.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say as well, thank you for having me on the panel today. I'm a long-term passionate gamer and also a neurodiversity advocate, and I'm a student mental health nurse. As far as my description, I've got long dark hair. I'm wearing a black turtleneck dress. Yeah, I think that's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm going to pass this over now to Allie.
Hi, thank you. Thank you again so much for having me as well. This is really a pleasure and an honor. So my name is Ellie. I have long brown curly hair with bangs and big glasses. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm wearing a navy sweater with flowers embroidered on it. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 10, I believe. And in the gaming industry, I'm a streamer and also an accessibility consultant and an accessibility advocate. And we talk a lot about accessibility in many different ways because I use a wheelchair. I'm a primary wheelchair user with a nerve disorder, which is undiagnosed. So there's attention deficit as well as motor going on, which I think plays a lot of different ways into how I look at video games and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for the introductions, y'all. And I'm very, very particularly excited for this panel because We were just chatting about it before the recording started, but I truly believe that the broader topic of cognitive accessibility is heavily, heavily underrepresented in accessible game development. And so I am just so excited to dive into this topic with the three of you today. So we have four topics. We have one about barriers, another about personal strategies. We're going to talk about intersectionalities and just like what devs can do to help cool folks like us so we can play your games because we want to play them. I promise we really, really do. And so why don't we go ahead and start with our first topic that we have today about barriers. So the driving question I have written here is, when playing games, what are some frequent barriers you run into as a player with ADHD? Any associated with like a specific genre or a specific platform? And I'm going to call on you, Thor, to kick us off for this question.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Morgan. So when it comes to video games in general, or just gaming in general, I find that one of the biggest obstacles that I end up falling into is something being too wide open, something giving me at times too much freedom. If you throw me into a game and you don't give me a direction and say, hey, go do this thing as your starting point, I can completely get lost and start to feel overwhelmed. At times it can feel like, okay, well, do I need to level this? Do I need to do this? Is there a story point that I need to do? And a lot of times this can lead to shutdown. This makes me not want to try because I feel like I'm going to be overwhelmed by everything in the game, or like I don't have a starting point that can kick me off of the dock, so to speak. But one of the other issues that I deal with a lot of times is a game's audio engineering. People with ADHD tend to get very sensory overload very quickly, whether that's the visuals on the screen or whether that's the audio that comes from a game, among other things. It's a very wide topic of what can cause sensory overload and how it can occur, but especially in games that have varying degrees of audio, whether that's just from very low basses that occur in background to very high-pitched tinnitus-inducing sounds like the high pitch from certain games like Fatal Frame or others. That may occur. That can be something that can make it impossible for me to progress through a game if they are constantly repeating or constantly blaring in my ears. And I find most commonly the genres that I will get these overloads from, both in the first thing I talked about and the second thing I talked about, are generally like your open world games. They want you to explore. And ever since I feel like the early days of 2011, we've gotten a lot of games that are like, hey, go and explore this vast world we've created. We're not going to give you any waypoints or markers or anything. We're just going to throw you in. Good luck. Have fun. Go figure it out. And at times, this really sucks to navigate. I understand that. I think that if you want to give people like a quest book or anything like that, that can be great towards leading people towards a point on a map. But it can also mean that I never get out of the gate with your game and I just might not play it. But when it comes to like horror and the audio engineering I was talking about, that for me is a very hard block of, if you have a ton of loud sounds occurring in quick succession or things that just kind of jump out at you that are very loud compared to the base game, it can make me not want to play your game because I don't know when I'm going to get hit with that. And that causes me anxiety. And that also causes me to shut down a lot of time, and I can't progress because I know it's going to keep happening. So I find that those are the two most prevalent genres that are either too open or just can be very sensory overload very quick, at least for me. But there are others, but those are the two I wanted to focus on.
Absolutely. And I think here the key when we're talking about this discussion today with ADHD is that sometimes most players will say, oh, I relate to that. But in this case, as you said, Thor, it's a complete shutdown and it's a complete barrier for you. It's not a matter of it makes the game feel worse or whatever. It's I will literally stop playing this game right now because we cannot continue. Would anyone else like to jump in with their thoughts or piggyback off of Thor?
I'm happy to.
Go ahead. Yeah.
A lot of my struggles are very similar to Thor. Too open world, too many choices. And I think to continue on to that, a hard part is when you can't track where you're leaving off. And so I really struggle with, okay, I've put the game down, loved it, played 4 hours, it was great. And then I come back and I can't remember where I was, what I was doing. And there was no way and no path to get there, to get back to where I was.
I call those for myself an accidental DNF, do not finish, because when you put it down and come back, I'm like, wait, what? Who am I? Where am I? Who are these people and how do I even play this game? And it's like, well, on to the next, I guess. What's up, Thor?
I just wanted to add on, like there was one game that I would give an example of that was perfect for me, which avoided that DNF problem, which was back in the day, back in my day, back in the day, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green had these little systems where you could start the game and it would give you a list by list thing of everything that you had done in your last playthrough, hitting the key points where you traveled, what you caught. And I found that was so helpful for me in terms of saying, oh, I remember this, because I can remember like key instances or landmarks that happen in video games, but maybe not everything in between. And if you fill in those landmarks, I find that it makes it way easier for me to say, oh, now everything's kind of trickling back in. I'm starting to remember these little details, and now I can pop right back in.
Absolutely. It like helps like juggle your memory of like the narrative and what you did, who you last battled, where you last explored. It's very, very helpful. Um, I'm going to jump into with my own answer to this question as well, where when I'm thinking about games and frequent barriers for myself related to all these things, is I mentioned to y'all earlier, but I'll mention now officially on the recording, is trees, decision trees. Oh my goodness, no. And so the way I look at this is I don't mind when a game is heavily decision tree. So think like Civilization, because that's like the whole game and I can go through and I have fun with the menus. But when I'm playing, for example, an action adventure RPG and I'm beating up the bad guys, I'm feeling cool, I got neat weapons, and all of a sudden, 30 minutes into the game, smack, here's a giant decision tree where you have to decide what you want to put your stats in and you have to decide what upgrades you want and everything. And I freeze, completely freeze up. And this is what I need to emphasize, is that it's not a matter of like, oh, I hate this, let me just Google whatever. Like I will literally become stun locked. And I can tell you there's been at least a dozen games in my life where I've completely DNF'd on spot because I saw the tree and I went, I can't deal with this. I'm like, is there a refund I can do? Because this is looking way too complicated. And so this is a very major area of frustration for me, especially too, tying back into like ADHD, my inattention decreases, right? So I begin to lose focus. There's all these words, especially if we don't have like demonstrations of what things are going to do. Like my brain just completely shuts down because I have to read large walls of text. And this will lead, if I do try to push through, into impulsivity. I'll just pick anything to just make the tree go away because I just don't care. So I will just literally select whatever option is there. Luckily, hopefully they have recommendations. And if they don't, then I'll just pick whatever and say, well, hopefully that wasn't a mistake, which can go into our next question we'll chat about, which is strategies to fix, because I'll find out later down the road, whoops, I just picked terrible decisions. I need to reset everything. And so that for me is a very large barrier related to ADHD and just game design in general. Does anyone have anything to add on to that? Or no, Sabina, you have your hand up too. You want to jump in here and share your experiences?
Yeah, so I wanted to just add sort of kind of following on from like Thor and Ellie's points earlier about sort of if you take a break from a game, like I play a lot of very large RPGs and I also have terrible memory for details connecting to storylines, but not just what's going on in the game, but also actually the controls. Like if I'm playing multiple games at the same time, it's really hard to remember the control systems for, especially if they're very similar games with like slightly varied controls. Like the idea of I had a tutorial at the very beginning of the game and that being enough that I can then remember that when I re-enter the game, that's just, it just doesn't work for me. But also in terms of story, to sometimes like I might be watching a cutscene and then I find I've kind of zoned out and there's no option for me to kind of revisit what's happened there. It's sort of like that's gone, and I can maybe YouTube it, but that experience is past. And another thing I wanted to talk about was also kind of related to frustration tolerance, in that I know that's a thing that is commonly an issue for ADHDers, but for me, it's like I can retry the same thing over and over as many times as needed if I can see what I'm doing wrong and be able to understand, oh, maybe I should try this. And when a game doesn't give me any kind of feedback that makes me feel like I can kind of see where I went wrong, that's the point that I would just not want to play anymore.
Absolutely. Thor, do you want to jump in on that?
I was actually going to say like that for me is, there was two things you touched on. One, which I think actually goes into another accessibility option, which is I had that frustration with a lot of games where not remembering the controls. I didn't mention earlier, but I do, on top of that, I'm also a streamer as well. And one of the things that I found through streaming was the accessibility to remap controllers to fit my needs. And a lot of times we do this by playing games on really ridiculous controllers, like a potato. But what I found was that by doing this, I found that there was certain games that I came to make control setups in specific ways that always followed the same rule. So for instance, if I was playing a game, my X button would always become jump. So whenever I'd go into a game, even with a regular controller, I would say, okay, let me go and check the remap settings. And then I would map those so that I never had to deal with having to relearn and get used to another system. I had a system that worked for me because I play a lot of different games, and it can be overwhelming at times to just remember because there's no universal system. So I ended up getting a system for Souls games. I ended up getting a system for Metroidvanias and for adventure. And I just found all these similar things that worked, but very much having the memory loss of, hey, I can't remember how this plays, and it becomes overwhelming to dive back in, especially with some of the complex games that are out now. Like, there's a lot that really require you to have a very skill-based knowledge, and it's overwhelming at times. And then I believe your second thing that you brought up was remind me, what was it, Sabina?
So it was related to frustration tolerance with difficulty and kind of running up against the same barrier.
I find like that's a huge thing. If you can visually show me, like, one of my favorite things in video games now is, a lot of video games will have these bosses where essentially they will go in and they'll attack, but they'll flash red to indicate that they're doing something. It's one of those things of like, oh, you're showing me that, hey, I probably shouldn't stand in this. Visual indicators are things that let me know, hey, if you don't do this, you will die or you're going to mess up. Are very, very helpful for me and have really changed the way I game. I know that's probably not specifically where you're going, but it did kind of trail off on that side of, if I know I'm doing something wrong or if I have an indicator that's visual in some way, it really does help my experience. So I just wanted to trail off on that just a tiny bit.
No, absolutely. And especially too, visuals help with focus. It helps with memory. And I do want to make a call out. Shout outs to the games that actually make the buttons the same color as what's on the controller, because my brain and like has like the UI and oriented with how the controller UI is, because I'm like, which one is A? Ah, yes, that one. And so shout outs to our friendly UI designers who remember to do that. But Thor, I actually think it's a really cool strategy that you remap to help with like the memory and everything too. That's really cool. Which actually leads us into the next question that I have for y'all, which is about personal strategies. So the driving question I have written down here for us is, when a barrier is presented to you as it relates to ADHD and just any intersectional means of that, what are some coping strategies you use when gaming? What works? What doesn't work? How were you inspired by this coping strategy, etc.? And so I have written down here, Sabina, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off with this question.
Yeah, no problem. So one of the barriers I didn't really get to mention specifically earlier, but one of the barriers I face is that I tend to play games in bursts, and I find that a lot of games with seasonal content obviously reward you for engaging daily, and I won't necessarily do that. If there's a weekend event or something like that, I might participate in that, but if something's going across an entire season, it's just, I'm going to lose interest. And once I feel like I can't catch up, I won't re-engage with the game. So one of the things I've started to do is just avoid playing games that will punish me for not logging in daily. Like, I have other things that I need to do in my life aside from gaming, and it's already difficult for me to manage with my hyper focus. So I think engaging specifically with games that, you know, I feel like I can pick up and play when I have the time, and not feel punished for it in some way is really important for me. Another thing, like going into the point you made, Morgan, before about like skill trees, and I find that like games having like if a game like allows me to have layered progression, in the sense that it kind of introduces systems that are quite simple at the beginning, and then it kind of progresses through the game, so I'm never given like an overwhelming amount of content. I find that those are games that I will stick with longer, so I tend to choose those games. And also, another thing that I do when I'm playing like a large game, like an RPG, and I know that I will kind of dip off for a while, I sometimes take some like brief notes about what was going on for myself, because it's not, the game won't necessarily do that for me. So
Oh goodness, I relate. Playing Baldur's Gate, I took so many notes, even though they actually have like a very thorough quest, because I would forget my mission and what I was up to doing. Because, you know, surprise, the person with ADHD goes off script from what the game wants you to do. Shocker, more at 11.
Shocker.
But I think that those are both very good points. And I'll add on to Sabina, because you brought up the trees again. For myself, one of my coping strategies for that is I'll just literally pass the controller to my husband and say, can you just look it up for me? I don't know anymore. And I want to keep playing this game because it's fun. But see, he's the opposite of me, where he likes to dig into that type of stuff. And so we'll co-op play with each other, where I'm just playing most of the game, but then when a decision comes up, I'm like, well, like, can you help me out? Also, it's nice too because he can look up the spoilers without telling me. Like, if it's like a dialogue thing, sometimes he'll be like, "I'm not gonna tell you." I'm like, "Okay, so clearly, like, whatever decision I make matters, so this will be more fun." Um, but of course, it's not like a super fun way to play because I'm obviously relying on another person, so I'm not independently playing a game. But it does actually bring some bond with it because, like, for example, I have a memory of full completing Breath of the Wild, where he would be looking things up and give me hints on where the shrines are, but wouldn't tell me exactly where. And so I would have like some more guidance than just running around in the middle of a desert or in the middle of a snowy mountain. But of course, it's an imperfect solution and just a coping strategy that I use through house rules that we have developed together. Um, but that's just me adding on. Does anyone have anything to add to that, or do you want to bring up more about strategies you use? What's up, Allie?
I would love to piggyback off of what you both said. Very much playing with people. So as a streamer, I actually use my chat in the same way that you game with your husband. So I'm like, okay, we're playing Monkey Island. I know that there's an answer to a puzzle. Okay, am I getting hot or cold? Am I yes using the right tool? And use that communication and that feedback from chat actually to help that. And also chat also 100% can keep me on track. So I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy 14, which is like open world city where you can do anything and everything and you're never going to remember what you logged in to do yesterday. And my chat very much actually helps keep me on track. And they're like, okay, so you're working on this. You were working on this thing yesterday. Is that what you want to continue working on for the impulsivity of ADHD? It's like, do you still feel the same vibe that you were feeling yesterday? So that's a big one. And then taking screenshots and notes is huge for me. Like, I have multiple notebooks of games that I've played. I know I said Monkey Island, but Monkey Island missed a lot of point and clicks, puzzles. I love that. Blueprints. I love games like that, but for someone with ADHD, they can be incredibly overwhelming because you might be like, I'm forgetting one tiny detail from this puzzle. So having that balance for me personally of having chat to be like, we're looking up the answer for you. You're really close. Or maybe you should go back to this previous room and look at new different things, or revisit your screenshot or revisit your notes. Really are coping mechanisms and personal strategies that I find make me want to continue playing a game versus dropping it and walking away.
That is absolutely brilliant. And I've never thought of that before of using your chat. I'm not a content creator. So I'm like, wait, that's actually kind of the best idea ever. And I have to major plus from the screenshot thing. In fact, I will give a very, very quick recent example of I was playing Peak with some friends and I literally could not for the life of me remember the controls, like literally at all. And I'm like, I don't have time to open the menu every time I read. And so I just literally screenshot it and I put it on as my second monitor.
So
And
smart.
I was like, I don't remember what buttons
Yeah.
anymore. So that's just a quick example of something recently. Thor, do you want to jump in? I see you on over there.
Yeah, actually, just to piggyback off of what everyone said, but especially Ellie, as somebody who also creates content, I find that utilizing my chat and like setting boundaries, just being like, hey, I'm going through this game and I'm going to reach that point, as you so eloquently called it, a DNF point, of do not finish point. It's like I'm going to want to play this game under my own power until I get to the point where I'm feeling really fed up. And then at this point, I want you all to be my safety net. I'm gonna have a I'm gonna have a safe word, in my case, potato butter. And when I say that, that's your cue that I want help. Jump on in here, get in, tell me exactly what I'm looking for. And originally, I experienced this mostly with a lot of Souls games, because Souls games at their core are obtuse. They're really hard to navigate through. They have a lot of those trees of how do I build? What should I do? And so I got very overwhelmed trying to play these originally. And it was one of the huge reasons I kind of did not enjoy these games at all, which is a hard 180 to how it is today. But it was very much being able to just say, hey, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm being gated, not because the game is difficult, but because the game is overwhelming. And so being able to just say, can people help me when I reach those specific points, made it so that I felt like even though there were difficult things ahead, I was never truly at the mercy of there's just too much that the game is trying to tell me. And more so, I was limited by had I actually taken the time to learn a boss or do something. So if there was ever a strat I need, I could say, okay, I've been at this for 3 hours. What am I supposed to be looking for here? And then somebody would be like, you need to hit under the right shoulder because he attacks from his left. And that was something that's like, oh, let's go. And then I was enjoying the game again. It made me go with a lot of games, especially like Baldur's Gate, as you mentioned, where it's like before, it's like, oh my God, that game is just overwhelming. Am I going to choose a bad decision? Am I going to hurt this character's feelings? And that would be a hard gate for me normally, but being able to just ask instead of having to take the time to look it up was extremely helpful for me to be able to just say, this is my coping mechanism. But more so than that, I'll say this for early me, the screenshots thing, absolutely, but also game guides from so many different places. It was very nice to be able to go on to say something like Game Facts back in the day. Just search up the chapter I was on and then just be like, hey, I don't know where I am. I've gotten very used to in my old age saying, hey, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to look something up because you're unsure and you're frustrated, and that doesn't make you less of a gamer. And I think that's one of the big things that's helped me a lot nowadays is realizing that it's okay to throw away that whole toxic gamer culture of you have to do this under your own power. The truth is you just have to be able to play the game however you find is best. And if that means looking up a guide or asking your friend for help or looking up a YouTube video, that's okay. And I think that was honestly the biggest block I had because I grew up in a space where I wasn't really allowed to ask that. Otherwise, it would make me seem very unable, which I was unable to do it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to ask a show of hands. How many of you have ever missed a tip or a key thing that someone's written out or character has said to you? And then you were like, how do I even play any of this anymore? And it's people like, you dummy, you missed the thing. And it's like your ADHD brain. This is actually one of the reasons why I'm okay with looking up things is because I just tell myself, well, if I was actually paying attention, I would have known to go down this area or go do this quest. I'm like, Shout outs to like Elden Ring, where it's like they drop lots of hints sometimes in the dialogue, but you know your girl, I just space bars, lizard, lizard, lizard. I'm like, just next, next, next. I'm like, I don't, I'm like, stop blabbing. I want to go beat people up. I want to pass this over to you, Allie, to finish us off for this question, because I know you want to add on, and then we'll move on to our next one.
The last thing I was going to say was save states. So if we're speaking specifically using Baldur's Gate as an example, the amount of save states I had in that game, I had them for every single decision, so that I could always resort back to changing something if I'm like, this makes me really uncomfortable, or like, I don't like where the story went and I'm going to stop playing. If that's the case, I utilize save states a lot in games.
Oh, absolutely. Which actually, it's really funny for save states. I'll name them after the thing, like Baldur's Gate. Remember I said earlier, where I'll be like, "LOL, should I actually explode this room?" And then hit save, and then I'm like, "All right, let's go." So I can see, like, what was I thinking when I made that save? I put in Morgan language when it was meant to be. And I'm like, "Ah, I
I
remember."
wish I had used one for the windmill.
Oh, I learned the windmill by
Yeetus,
just
deletus?
pushing.
Question mark. Like, which decision to do? I like the whole sentiment here of we should play as we want and are able, right? Because games are meant to be fun. And what's the whole point? Um, so for our next topic, then we have intersectionalities with other conditions or just other personal experiences too, outside of disability. So the driving question I have written here is intersectionality means considering all of our experiences. So everything about ourselves, not just ADHD, but maybe another disability, another diagnosis, another part of your life, whether you're a parent or maybe someone as, whatever background you have. So my question for us is intersectionality means considering all of our experiences. When you think about barriers, how does intersectionality come into play for you? And so I wrote down, I'll kick this one off. And so I am deaf. I have other chronic illnesses as well related to autoimmune, and I have ADHD out of my butt. So it's often a joke. I will say all aboard the hot mess express over here when it comes to gaming, because sometimes that's how it be. But how this sometimes will connect is, for example, with my chronic fatigue and chronic pain that I have related to autoimmune diseases that I have, which I have quite a few. Sometimes I will not be able to do very long gaming sessions, and I will need to frequently save. However, as a result, that means with my ADHD brain, I'll often forget what I last did. And so this is a very common barrier for me because I will play like on my Switch and put down, and then I come back and pick it up, even if it's like an hour later because I need to take a quick break because my fingers were starting to hurt or something like that. And I'm like, what the hell was I doing? I'm like, what? Also, too, I'm like past Morgan because I'll like save at the most bizarre times because normally you can't stop. It's a sudden I need to stop playing right now. And so like I'll be like in the middle of a level and be very confused. And so this is often a barrier for me. Another one related to my deafness is that Thor, I really like earlier you mentioned about like auditory processing and stuff like that. So I am completely 100% deaf, but I do have a cochlear implant that I can wear that gives me some amount of sound. If people are familiar with them, they're not fantastic, but they're helpful. But the problem is mentally, I need to focus more. It's not like natural hearing. You had to literally focus on the sound coming through. But imagine if you have something like, oh, I don't know, an inattention disorder. It makes it kind of difficult because I joke it's like the beans in the basket. I have to take beans out of my focus basket into this one so I can focus on the hearing. But then all of a sudden my visual processing decreases. And so sometimes I'll joke for a game, I'll just take the implant out completely because I'm like, I'm literally missing dialogue or I'm missing key visuals because I'm focusing so much on trying to hear. And I already have a focus in attention disorder. So, you know what? Frick it. And I take it completely off. But then now I can remove a complete channel from playing the game. And so this is a constant balance. And I'll often say, like, for example, if I'm playing like a tactical FPS, of course I'll keep the cochlear implant in, but if I'm playing Baldur's Game, it comes out because I shouldn't need it, hopefully. But that's a little bit about my intersectional needs and experiences. Does anyone want to add on and share their experiences, or maybe they experience something very similar?
I'm happy to. Oh,
Sure.
Sabina, go ahead.
Yeah, Sabina, and then we'll go to you, Allie.
So I also have ADHD and autism, and I do find that there is very often it almost feels like two sides of my brain that are competing, in a sense that what I need with my ADHD and what I need with my autism are almost opposite. And an example of that would be sort of when I start a game, if there is too much guidance in a game, I usually find that understimulating. I need the ability to almost make creative decisions and explore. But then when there isn't enough guidance, like if I'm just left in a sandbox, I'm just like, this is so overwhelming. I don't know what to do. Like a good example would be like when I started playing Elden Ring, I initially was just like, I do not know what to do. There is so much going on. I'm going to keep charging at the guy on the horse and keep getting killed and not learning from that experience. But then luckily my brother had been playing the game. He was further ahead than me and would just like, we'd just chat and screen share, and he would like guide me through, you know, just almost like initial, you know, maybe you want to try heading in this direction instead, and just having like a little bit of scaffolding to that experience to start me off, I found really helpful.
I think that one
Love
also
that.
calls back to when we were talking earlier about like personal strategies of like tapping into others to help us what it's like. Although, of course, I always emphasize it's fun and a good way to connect, but also kind of sucks that you have to be dependent. So it's like that constant balance. Allie, do you want to add on to this?
Yeah. And now ADHD, I was focusing on what Sabina said. Sorry. Um,
You're
give me a
totally
minute.
good.
My brain, I'm like literally like fully lost my point. Going back and looking at the transcript.
No, you're totally good.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, for my disabilities, I have an undiagnosed potential autoimmune, potential neuropathy. So, for me, a lot of it comes into my barriers are with motion. And so, auditory is a big one. If things are too loud or if I can't control the different stimulations, that's a very big barrier of I will put down a game if the footsteps are too loud. Um, But a big thing for me is if I can't control motion or if I can't be in third person, that I find makes it so I can't even enter into the playing field to see if it works with my ADHD. I love a lot of sandbox survival crafter games, but a lot of those are in first person. So being able to have that control can also help make the entrance to the game a lot easier.
Absolutely, especially two-player agency is sometimes the key to accessible design and making a game make the most sense for you and literally everyone. So I think that's an excellent point. Sabina or Thor, you want to add on to this?
I was just gonna say I am currently looking into autism as a diagnosis, just because I grew up with a lot of things that didn't quite fit ADHD, but just wanted to say, like, with what Sabina was mentioning earlier, just 100% on the money, honestly, is like what it feels like, at least from somebody who's looking into this, of sometimes being too understimulated, sometimes being too overstimulated. It's like the porridge. Too cold, too hot, just right. And it's very hard to find that balance. And sometimes I wish there were just tools or toggles that could be in games for that. But I don't really have too much else to add on to that. I just wanted to put that in there, and yeah, good points.
Oh, absolutely. Especially too, I want to point out that all four of us here have different thresholds for everything too. And so this is why tools are extremely important. Sabina, jump in here.
Like another thing I wanted to say is like an example of sort of the over guidance aspect of that as well is like I appreciate that like like having a map in the corner of the screen can be like really helpful, but also for me, I can often find that like I hyper focus on that map. I'm not taking in my surroundings at all. And then like I feel like I'm not fully immersed in the game in a way that I'd like to be. And I think having like different map options as a way to interact with that, you know, so it's not just me following a point that's bleeping. You know, I find when you have like a top bar where there's like a pointer on there, but like I'm seeing the screen more as a whole rather than just kind of looking at that specific corner of the screen. It keeps me like immersed in the experience, so I don't just feel understimulated from that level of guidance.
The difference between Elden Ring and Monster Hunter Wild. Do I focus on everything in front of me, or do I find every piece of honey on this map forever till the end of time?
If it means anything with my ADHD, I'll probably ignore all of the above and just go and like pick plants in a field for like 2 hours and be like, woohoo! I'm having the time of my life. Hence, lost in a side quest.
It's that or needing to collect every collectible that I can possibly see and just being like in places I'm not supposed to be, but I need that one thing.
So how did you feel about the Korok quest and Breath of the Wild?
There's a reason that Breath of the Wild was a game I had to drop because I was like, I am too overwhelmed. I can't, there are too many things to collect almost.
See, I think for me, I had to make a very conscious decision. And this is actually something maybe goes back to just coping strategies, where I just tell myself certain things I'm not going to full complete or collect. So like Korok seeds, I told myself not doing it. I'm like, if there's one nearby, I'll do it because it's fun to find them. Whereas shrines, I was like, I want to do them all. So, you know, I think from there, picking and choosing your battles, knowing and like almost making like a deal with yourself, like you're not going to hold this against yourself. Actually, I didn't mention this earlier, but bringing up the full completion thing, this is one of the reasons I can't play phone games, like iPhone games or anything, is because of the need to constantly log on and the need to collect everything. I actually have a full blocker, so I don't download any of them because they just do not work with my brains. And in fact, I think they're kind of ethically cruel to folks who are like neurodiverse or have ADHD because it's like literally taps into like the worst symptoms. But sorry, maybe that's like off topic a little bit, but I was just thinking like intersectionality and like also to like different genres and stuff like that where it's like no go. Thor, you probably want to add to that.
I actually do because I have the same issue of I do not play mobile games at all. They're actually a genre I've entirely avoided because I have that when games pressure you to do things in a way that is not comfortable, that's like one of my big blocks. It's like stamina systems, needing to replenish, needing to log on to get this extra bonus so you can do things. It's like your game for me should be playable out of the gate without needing to worry about these upgrades. If it's not a fully playable experience, and if I need to constantly put myself on a schedule, which I am very bad at, then I can't play your game. Like, don't put me needing. There are some times in games where like you need to be here at this time. I'm like, okay, the game will remind me of this though. But like with stuff like that, those constant notifications, those constant pings of log in to get your bonus, it almost becomes an addiction to try and keep up with. And that for me, I've had to really distance myself away from because when it comes to my ADHD, I have time blindness. And I've done a lot to really prepare myself for time blindness to the point where I have a lot of schedules, a lot of things. But when I log in, I will get pulled in and I will just keep going down the rabbit hole to play more and more. And I find that games like those are extremely difficult for me to step away from. So I avoid entirely.
Well, especially too, they're literally designed to be difficult to step away from, which is why you have to make the decision of no touchy then. You know, I'm gonna bring us all up to the next topic, the last one we have here, just because I'm looking at the clock, but also too, because now we can just open up to just more topics. We can bring up more intersectionality, more about strategies, more about anything else, but this is kind of a broad topic for y'all. And it's what devs can do to help. So the question we have here is, what are some things you wish developers would do for you that would remove a barrier in a game as it relates to ADHD and generally your intersectional experience? Allie, would you kick us off for this one?
Yeah. I have two that really come to mind. First, I would say would being ask. I think a really big thing, you've got people in the communities that love games, that are very passionate about video games, who can speak on their experiences, that you could say in the mapping before you even get to it. So it's not a QA after the games come out and then you're fixing systems. Asking asking anybody in the community, hiring consultants, having those conversations early in your development process is a very, very, very useful tip that can save you lots of work down the road. And then you're also encouraging us to continue to be along with your development as the game comes along. And I become an advocate for a game that where the community or where the devs talk to the community. It's not, and they involve us in the process. I think for me, no one needs to be perfect. No game is going to be perfect for everybody. As much as that is what we want, and as much as that is what we are working towards, that takes time, that takes growth. But having those conversations early is a huge thing. And my next one, very big, is a note system in video games that requires things like that. So like being able, if I'm playing a survival crafter and I need to make 4 or 5 different machines and I'm in the middle of the process, let me make those notes in the game before I log off. Blueprints, let me screenshot and make notes about rooms and incorporate that into the game. I think are, for me personally, 2 like barriers that I think could make a huge difference in just making it feel all inclusive.
Absolutely. And to chime into your first point, the definition of nothing about us without us is involving the community as early and as often as possible throughout game development. Don't want to bring someone in. It's too late if you already have your systems design set, and then it's like, oh no, it's actually just riddled with barriers. And so I cannot emphasize that enough. And I'm really glad too you brought like up like a note-taking system. I feel like this is becoming a more common ask of like somehow incorporating that into the design. And I think especially too for games, it can actually naturally flow not just as an accessibility option, but just as a general experiential thing for folks. Like I think back to The Last of Us with Ellie taking notes in her notebook of like recent events and stuff like that. And so, but of course that wasn't player initiated. We're looking for something more like interactive. And so thinking of a few examples. What are some other things y'all wish developers would do that would help remove barriers in games for folks like us with ADHD? What's up, Sabina?
So one of the things, and it was kind of going back to the point that Thor made in the previous question, which is to do with like, and I think you made a similar point with mobile games and how they can kind of feel a little bit like exploitative of your whole like dopamine reward system, and you know, constantly like giving you reasons that to log in every day. I think making sure that your game is intrinsically motivational to play, the actual gameplay is fun and engaging. You don't have to use rewards as a means of getting the player to engage.
Absolutely, especially with ADHD, folks will often talk about like dopamine driven or reward driven. And so I'm really glad you brought that up because it's like literally it's like the worst possible design for this type of brain. And so I completely agree that, I mean, don't you want us to play the game itself? So thanks for bringing that up, Sabina. Thor, what's up?
Honestly, this kind of goes back to what Ellie was saying originally about getting people with these experiences working on these games, giving their input. One of the things I would like to see is a lot more games focusing on their audio design, because I feel like a lot of games live or die by their audio. You can have the best game in the world, but if it is overwhelming for somebody to play and there are not options to bring down those highs or those lows, like one of the games I actually thought did this, I wouldn't say like great or bad, or one of the games that actually did this and I thought it was all right was Resident Evil 4, surprisingly enough, where they had audio bouncers where you could choose different levels. It was like, hey, we're going to suppress down the bullet sound. We're going to bring down certain atmospheric noises that are going to be loud, and we're going to level all of these out. Or you can choose like, hey, I want the home theater experience. I want everything. I want the loud bangs. I want the gunshot noises to not be suppressed, stuff like that. Because I find that for a lot of games, a lot of shooters, stuff like that. I don't really touch that genre because it's not really my thing. But when I do find myself in there for like some type of survival horror or anything like that, I generally find that I step away from it because it's too loud and because I'm getting too overwhelmed too quickly. So I'd really like to see devs work a lot more within the community as a whole and just within the disability community as a whole to say, hey, how can we make this more enjoyable for those playing who may either be very sensitive to audio or may need additional assists for audio, maybe an increase in sound for things because maybe you're missing cues. And I find that that's, for me at least, as somebody with ADHD, and that would be very helpful for just keeping me attuned to the game, because like there's certain games like Fatal Frame I can't play because there's a tinnitus or there's a high pitched ringing noise whenever a spectral ghost appears, and it causes my tinnitus to trigger, and it also just completely knocks me out for the day. Like if I hear that noise, I'm out. I'm done with whatever I'm doing that day. So but honestly, the other thing I would really like to see more is more, I think games are getting better about this, but more options to remap game controllers. I find, especially now in today's day and age, that there's no reason why we can't have remapping in any video game. Just if you can put it on a controller, you should be able to remap those buttons to what you need. And I know that goes more into that, but as an outsider, I look at them like, this seems like at the very least I should be able to change my face buttons. I should be able to change whether or not a controller holds an action or whether I have to rapidly tap it. There's a lot of things I would really like to see change in controller accessibility. And I know that's going into an entirely different topic, but I do find that having that similarization of controls among games as a whole can be very helpful in keeping my attention and make it so I'm not forgetting everything all the time when I pick up a game after a long period of time, as Sabina mentioned earlier.
I'm going to jump in here and say that it's definitely on topic because oftentimes I see this from game dev perspective. When people think control remapping, they think of a very specific persona. I think that you're dispelling that right now by saying that way more people benefit from control remapping than you may realize in terms of accessibility. So I'm really glad you're bringing it up.
In fact, Ellie, I think we were on another panel where they described this, and I can't remember the full metaphor, but it's the curb.
Yes.
It's do you remember what that was?
Yeah,
Because I
the
can't.
curb effect.
Yeah,
Yes.
the curb effect.
Exactly that. And I can't remember what it is, so I'm not going to say it out. But for those of you who don't know, look it up, or somebody wants to repeat it. But yep, that's my piece.
I can kind of summarize, but basically it's kind of the idea of, so, on a curb, now there's dips at intersections. Those weren't always there. And those were originally made for people in wheelchairs, people who needed accessibility because they could not step up the curb. And what ended up happening was, after a big movement and a lot of people standing up for that and people coming in with sledgehammers and literally taking parts of the curbs out, it provided something that now so many different people use and might not even realize that originally it was for something else. And it becomes an inclusive thing for everybody to use, and it gives it an easier access point.
Absolutely. As I like to say, when you design for one, you extend to many. Or as at least at my company, one thing we always joke is we always just say accessibility is just good design. It's not just, like this like
Yes.
fun little frill thing on the side. It's like actually makes the experience better for anyone who benefits from the feature. And so I'm really happy we're shifting our paradigms and framing more to this universal design aspect.
But yeah. Oh no, go.
If you're not done, please go ahead.
All I was going to say is I just want to see more controller accessibility in general, because I think it goes into a wide array of different disability access. And I think that especially with ADHD and stuff like that, having stuff set up in a way that is good for you is so helpful, because having that normalcy and having that, what's the word I'm looking for here? Having that comfortability and sameness can be very helpful in us just being comfortable stepping into your game in the first place. That's all.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought this up too, because at the end of the day, like accessibility is just good for everyone, and especially with like when we're thinking from things from remapping to I know we mentioned, would you like to bring up real fast, Ali, about the visual cues and hints? I think that's one good point we can end on.
Yeah. It was something that got brought up in the panel earlier but the idea of being able to have visual cues if someone needs it of in a boss fight or if you're lost in a big open world. Not everybody might want to play with those, but giving us the option to turn those on. I've been seeing that a lot more in video games lately, and it's really, really, really great. And I'm really excited to see that. Also, same with being able to toggle on, as Thor mentioned, either having to hold or to spam a button. Being able to just have those small adjustments might make or break someone on being able to play your game.
Especially too, I don't know about y'all, but I have impulsivity, so having a toggle rather, because I'll press the button like 10 times. So I'm like, did it work? Did it work? Did it work? You know what I mean? And so I think there's a very strong connection there. So unfortunately, I feel like we could just go for like another like 10 hours. Like you feel is it time to start our podcast, y'all? You know, the ADHDers. But we do have to wrap up for today. I want to open the floor if anyone wants to say any final comments. If you could say one thing to developers, one key takeaway from this, what would it be? One sentence, what would it be for y'all? So for me, I would say accessibility is just good for everyone, especially make sure you consider ADHD because it's a heavily underrepresented topic right now. Ali, what do you want to say?
I was going to say, ask us. Ask the people that live with what we're going through, and we're happy to help.
Sabina, you want to add on? What's your one thing if you want people to take away from this conversation?
I think I would add that accessibility and tools that help one group might also hinder another. So making those toggleable is really important.
Oh, 100%. And Thor, do you want to finish this off?
I'd say a lot of your user base has ADHD. So remember not to start accessibility at launch. Start it at the beginning of conception.
Absolutely. There's millions of us. Millions. We're under the floorboards. I love it.
We're everywhere.
Oh gosh. So I want to thank you all again for taking time today to discuss ADHD in the context of video games. As mentioned, I really hope that from this conversation, folks are leaving with some insights, examples, and actionable ideas for how we can make games better for those with ADHD or anyone adjacent to it or lots of other intersectional needs. Shout outs to our panelists today, the three of you plus me. I think this is a great vibe, and I hope that folks get a lot from this. As a reminder for you all, make sure to check out the rest of the Game Accessibility Conference. And I recommend if you want to learn more about other experiences, like, for example, deafness or vision or anything like that, check out the live experiences playlist on the GA conference YouTube page. They compile it all together so you can learn about the very, very wild intersectionality and diversity that is the human experience. Thank you all again for your time, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.